While we're waiting for others to arrive, let me make just a couple of announcements. First of all, we're going to be welcoming a guest later this morning. She'll be here for our class. Her name is Leslie Brown. She's with the Washington Immigrant Response Team, and she'll be talking a little bit about what that is all about and how you can get involved if you're interested. It's a group of volunteers that are monitoring ICE, but also helping our immigrant neighbors, people that are afraid to go out. So they're picking up groceries for them. They're helping get their kids to school. They're accompanying them to court for their hearings. So these are things that we are doing. Many congregations are involved in helping the immigrant neighbors who are living in fear for their lives right now. So just to give you a heads up that she'll be with us this morning. Also, there's a number of handouts on your table. There's a blue one, what to do if ICE invades your neighborhood. The green one is a statement that the bishops of Region 1 prepared in support of our immigrant neighbors. That was a statement that came out really early on in the Trump administration, and I think it came out in January or February, about a year ago, but still is very relevant and even more so today. And then there's also a wonderful article, a very moving article by Jim Wallace called Mourning in Minneapolis, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. And then I also wanted to draw your attention, there's a couple of posters, you see them around the church, but they're on your table, Rebuilding After Repatriation, and you heard Pastor Deb mention it, but let me just say another word about it. Global Refuge, which used to be called Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Port, they are now called Global Refuge, and they are going to be here at Our Savior's on the 14th of this month, Saturday morning, 9:30 to noon. And it's a Synod event that we're sponsoring. And you may or may not know that our congregation put forth a resolution at the Synod Assembly in May of last year to support Global Refuge, and particularly to encourage congregations to consider supporting this program called Camino a Casa. Camino a Casa is where Global Refuge now is focusing a lot of their energies and financial support because they're not able to resettle very many people right now because the Trump administration is not allowing immigrants to come into this country. And so right now they're helping these young people, ages 12 to 22, who are coming up from Mexico and Central America. They're being sent by their families because they're in desperate poverty. They are trying to escape the gangs and the drugs. And so they come here looking for work, and then they get deported. They get sent back. And then they try to come back again because they feel like they've failed their families. Well, what Global Refuge is doing is they now have a program where they work with the State Department. They find out about these young people who are being sent back, and they accompany them. And they get them back to Guatemala, to Mexico, where they have a center and office now. And they have people there to work with these young people. They do mental health screening. They have medical support. They provide job training. They even find out more about their family and what does their family need, so that they want them to be successful so they don't have to come back to the United States. You know, it's an amazing program. And in talking with Andrew Steele, who is with Global Refuge, he said, we have 100% success rate. So it's an amazing program. We're going to be watching a film about the program, and then we're also going to be Zooming directly to Guatemala live, and we'll be having conversation with some of the youth and caseworkers, so you'll be able to find out more about it. So I just encourage you to think about coming if you If you can register for it, that would be great because we just need to know how many to expect. But you can just walk in too. If you forget to sign up, please come anyway. Anyway, so we'll be hosting that on Saturday the 14th. Oh, and also there's no obligation, but there's a flyer about my book on immigration. Some of you picked that up when it came out in 2024. And as you know, the immigration issue has just gotten more and more important to us right now in this country as we deal with immigration and particularly caring for our immigrant neighbors in lieu of the draconian policies of the current administration, which we'll talk about this morning. Anyway, the book is discounted and it's cheaper to buy it from Chalice than it is online, believe it or not, from Amazon. So yeah, there's a discount code on those little cards. Well, let's begin. Welcome. Good to have you all here this morning. And I want to, again, welcome our friends from Washington Immigration Support Network. We'll be hearing from them later in the hour. Initially, a Nazi supporter, Pastor Martin Niemöller, changed his views and he wrote in 1946 this famous poem. You'll recognize it. First, they came for the communists, and because I was not a communist, I did not speak up. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then he concludes, and then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. We're going to watch a short film, just a 1-minute film about how that is playing out today in Minneapolis. Last Saturday, 7 federal agents tackled and then shot and killed Alex Jeffrey Preddy, a 37-year-old ICU nurse. It looked like an execution, though the administration quickly defended the shooting, saying this opponent of the state deserved it. ICE had said they had come to Minneapolis to root out criminals and fraud. And then they tackled people to the ground in city parks, harassed parents and children on their way to school. And another murder victim was Renee Good, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen born in Colorado, a mother of 3, award-winning poet who had just dropped off her 6-year-old son at school. She was killed by an ICE agent as she attempted to drive away from an area where agents were patrolling. The fatal shooting, captured on video, is shocking enough. But what is equally disturbing are the lies that came from the Trump administration within hours of the killing. In an attempt to justify her death, Trump claimed Good ran over an ICE agent. Not true. Vice President Vance and Secretary Noem demonized Good, calling her a left-wing radical and that she was a domestic terrorist. An agent attempted to force her out of her car, and frightened, she tried to drive away when she was shot 3 times through the car window. ICE agents refused to render medical aid and rejected an offer by a bystander who was a physician. Senator Patty Murray posted, Conducting immigrant enforcement doesn't mean you execute American citizens on the street. Yet DHS is lying about what we can see with our own eyes. Since Kristi Noem won't, state governments everywhere need to hold accountable out-of-control federal agents. Faith leaders later met with protesters gathering to keep vigil, calling for calm and recalling the dignity of every human being. Renee's wife, Becca, shared this statement. The people who did this had fear and anger in their hearts, and we need to show them a better way. We honor Renee's memory by living her values, rejecting hate and choosing compassion, turning away from fear and pursuing peace, refusing division and knowing we must come together to build a world where we can all come home safely to the people we love. Trump has openly claimed that Minneapolis was being targeted because of its large Somali population. The majority of these refugees are here legally. They were assisted by Lutheran Social Services. As more than 2,000 ICE agents were being deployed to Minnesota, the president compared Somalis to garbage and falsely claimed that Somali gangs were taking over the city of Minneapolis. This is all part of a big lie that we must fear immigrants and refugees, with politicians calling them murderers and rapists, falsely accusing them of taking away our jobs and poisoning our culture. So like the Jews and other undesirables in the 1940s Germany, they must be rounded up, incarcerated, and deported to preserve our way of life. Seemingly, this justifies that just since July, there have been 18 shootings, 7 deaths by rogue ICE agents, not to mention some 35 people who died in the detention centers in 2025. Quinnipiac University released a poll on January 13 showing that 57% of voters now disapprove of how ICE is enforcing immigration laws, while only 40% approve. 46% now support abolishing ICE, while 43% do not. And a majority, 53%, said Renee Good's shooting was not justified, versus 35% who think it was. Immigrant families today are living in fear of being incarcerated and or deported. ICE is carrying out a reign of terror under the leadership of Stephen Miller, Trump's chief advisor on immigration, and Kristi Noem, director of Homeland Security. ICE agents are showing up at court hearings and kidnapping defendants. They are invading people's homes without a warrant. They are showing up at schools and playfields in hopes of ambushing their parents. They are raiding workplaces like the meatpacking plant in Bellingham and carting workers off to a detention center. The Supreme Court has given them permission to do racial profiling, so they are now pulling black and brown people over in their cars and stuffing them into vans. NPR reports that ICE is using unmarked cars, some with no license plates or fake plates, as they swoop in to arrest unsuspecting victims. Many of them are here legally, like the drama teacher in Kirkland who was detained for nearly 2 weeks before he was released, or a Washington state official and her daughter who were detained at the US-Canadian border and sent to a detention center in Texas where they slept on the floor amidst very unsanitary conditions for several weeks before being returned to Seattle. Or the mother, the Hispanic mother who dropped off her 4-year-old son at a preschool in Issaquah only to be abducted by ICE and deported a month later to her country of origin. So this son lost his mother. And according to the Seattle School District, just last week, several schools were under shelter-in-place protocol due to reports of ICE activity in the Seattle area. And who could have predicted that Seattle's new mayor would have to outline policies dealing with a potential invasion by ICE and other federal agents? And while President Trump argued that he was simply trying to rid America of criminals who were here illegally, only 35% of individuals who've been sent to detention centers and or deported have a criminal record. Most are law-abiding refugees, many who fled persecution or hardship, just trying to take care of their families and make a better life for them. So how did we as a nation come to this? And what can we do? Let's ponder that question as we look at some political cartoons and social media postings for a moment. They didn't send ICE after a single street gang. They didn't send soldiers to recover missing children. They didn't arrest or deport a single person on the Epstein list. They went after the law-abiding housekeepers, gardeners, cooks, teachers, single moms, and car wash workers. Jesus was a refugee after he was born. Whatever you do to the least of them, you do it to me. Menacing out-of-control gang members in the U.S. not facing deportation. Federal Judge William Young, a Reagan appointee, says ICE goes masked for a single reason: to terrorize Americans into quiescence. In all our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked secret police. This is my birth certificate, U.S. passport. My ancestors came here 350 years ago. So why aren't you white like a real American? I protest today so that I don't have to hide a family in my attic tomorrow. It was not Hitler or Himmler who abducted me, beat me, shot my family. It was the shoemaker, the milkman, the neighbor who received a uniform and then believed they were the master race. What would you allow your government to do to others? They will eventually do it to you. Before deportation, she was a beloved member of the community for 139 years. And of course, we remember what's inscribed in a plaque on the Statue of Liberty. Can we read that together? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuge of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I'm going to skip ahead because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for our friends who are with us this morning. Over the years, many Americans have been suspicious and fearful of immigrants, arguing they were too numerous, unwilling to assimilate, bringing disease or crime into the country. Politicians have often exploited those fears, most of them exaggerated or unfounded, resulting in the government passing discriminatory immigration laws, as well as detaining, incarcerating, and expelling millions of immigrants over the years. This is a nation founded on the principles of equality, liberty, and justice for all, and where a majority of citizens claim to be followers of the Judeo-Christian values. Passages of Scripture are explicit about welcoming the stranger, and I'd like you to read this passage from Leviticus with me now. When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So now we have President Trump promising to round up millions of undocumented immigrants. Already ICE is arresting thousands of refugees, dragging them off in chains, deporting them to countries like Sudan and Venezuela, often without due process, which is guaranteed by the 5th and 14th Amendments. What the administration fails to mention is that such action will be devastating to our economy and to our nation's future. The hurtful and hateful rhetoric of how immigrants are dangerous and poisoning this country is part of a right-wing conspiracy to convince us that the enemy is among us and has got to be dealt with and expelled. They're seen as threatening our white privilege, our way of life, and our future as a country. But the opposite is true. These newcomers are not only enriching our lives with their presence, but they are providing us with hope and the promise of a better future. Why? Let's look at a couple of factors. First, I'm not sure well you can see this slide, but it shows that our birth rate as a country has plateaued. We are not even replacing ourselves. We are an aging population. More and more, we need foreign-born workers. The projections indicate that in the long term, immigration is a big factor for demographic growth and the stability of our nation. Where our population peaked in 2024 at 333.4 million and will only decline from there. Now, it's interesting. Congress set a number of 675,000 of permanent visas that could be issued each year. Biden set a cap in 2024 at 125,000. Trump has lowered that ceiling to just 7,500 with the stipulation they must be white and speak English. Vice President Vance spoke recently at a right-wing Turning Point rally at the University of Mississippi, where he proclaimed, "We have to get these numbers way down." Well, by December, the Department of Homeland Security boasted that since Trump's return to office, 2.6 million illegal immigrants had left the country. 622,000 had been deported, and nearly 2 million have left voluntarily. And now, for the first time in our nation's history, our nation's population growth will be a net zero or likely less. So let's consider the cost of deporting immigrants. Without increased immigration, consider the impact that it could have on our economy with fewer able-bodied workers and the strain that the need for elder care will put on the entire system. You know, most of the workers in our nursing homes are new immigrants. Or the child care system in this country could collapse. For nationally, immigrants, while they make up 20% of the child care workers in preschools and daycares, it's 40% in New York and 50% in Los Angeles. And already immigrants are not showing up for work across the country for fear of ICE. Second, we must not dismiss the importance of immigration to the economic health and future of the nation. The National Chamber of Commerce indicates that the economic well-being of the U.S. depends on bringing more workers into this country, not less. Immigration has not only been an important to the job growth, but as I mentioned, the economic driver. For according to the Congressional Budget Office, over the next decade, immigration stood to generate $7 trillion boost in our economy. That's what they projected, but no longer. Migrant families, documented and undocumented, contribute to the government coffers in large amounts. In 2023 alone, undocumented households paid $55.9 billion in federal taxes and $33.9 billion in state and local taxes. Economists suggest that the U.S. is successful in deporting between 11 and 12 million undocumented, the economy will shrink by at least 4%. Consider the devastating impact of how the lack of migrant workers will cripple agriculture, construction, healthcare, and the service industries. So let's review what's happened since the new administration began its strategy of deporting millions of refugees to make America more white again. First, last January, there were 10,000 refugees fully vetted by the UN and State Department who had an entry visa and plane ticket in hand and were told they could not come. Second, all funding that had been approved by Congress for resettlement agencies, including Global Refuge, was cut off. Third, Trump attempted to eliminate birthright citizenship promised by the 14th Amendment, and further suggested that those who already had naturalized citizenship, such as children adopted from other countries, could be taken away. The Supreme Court has yet to rule. Fourth, Trump promised a golden visa for sale for $5 million and admitted white South African refugees. Fifth, while at the same time, Trump tried to remove the temporary status protected that was granted by the Biden administration for over 1 million refugees from countries like Ukraine, Afghanistan, Haiti, Venezuela, Honduras, Nepal, and Cameroon. Sixth, the IRS agreed to turn over records of all refugees to Homeland Security in order to speed up the agency's mass deportation efforts. And sanctuary sites are now in jeopardy. The administration changed a policy that had been affirmed by Congress and has been in place for decades that protected schools, hospitals, and houses of worship, but no longer. We at Our Saviors have had to put together a particular policy in order to protect our preschool students and families. And if all of this doesn't send chills down your back, consider this. The Department of Homeland Security has decided to have the state of Texas function as an annex of ICE, a state-run federal enforcement unit for an everyday policing of illegals. They are developing a statewide transportation grid that will operate 24/7, run by armed contractors operating ICE locations in every county in the state. These are round-the-clock teams of contractors collecting immigrants from authorities who've been deputized by ICE. This will involve 2,000 full-time personnel and a fleet of hundreds of SUVs roving the state at all hours looking for illegals. And the governor made it clear that every sheriff is to cooperate, basically turning Texas into an industrial deportation machine. And what is coming to Texas, who knows what state may be next. Congress has given Immigration and Customs Enforcement a budget of $155 billion, larger than the entire Russian military budget. Although that may be now in jeopardy at the moment. but it includes funds to hire more agents and build more detention centers across the country, like Florida's Alligator Alcatraz, which has not been that much of a success. Though the funding, as I said, can be in jeopardy at the moment. And ICE has been using scripture to recruit more agents. This is an ad recruiting agents. It's a quote from Isaiah. Some of you that were at my class last fall about how scripture is misused. Well, here's a recruitment video. It says, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here I am. Send me as an ICE agent. But what's even more chilling is what you see in the actual clip. It shows an agent with a gun pointed somewhere at somebody. And the words are from Psalm 18. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. I did not turn my back until they were destroyed. This is your Homeland Security recruiting ICE. And most threatening has been the deployment of the military to assist ICE in rounding up refugees in major cities across the country. Well, the administration's harsh deportation tactics make little distinction between legal immigrants and people who have entered the U.S. illegally, or between immigrants with some criminal record and travelers with visa problems. These blurred lines are alienating Americans so that a majority, or 62%, now disapprove versus 35% who approve of Trump's purge. 63% don't approve of deporting those with no criminal record. And immigration enforcement has now become synonymous with federal agents killing citizens on the street. Jennifer Rubin writes, each arrest, assault, detention, deportation of hardworking, law-abiding residents who pose no threat to anyone is a tragedy for the immigrants, their loved ones, their co-workers, their religious communities, the local economy, and the moral and emotional climate of the cities where immigrants have lived and worked for decades. The good news is that according to a 2025 PRRI American Values Survey poll, majorities of Americans oppose these civil liberty violations and now support a pathway to legalization or citizenship. In fact, a new poll shows that 60% of registered voters now support a path to legalization of undocumented immigrants. An additional 12% agree they should have legal status but not citizenship, and only 24% want them deported. Only 24%. It's a swing of 15 points since last year. The public attitude is shifting. It is interesting to note that 6 in 10 Americans, or 60%, now favor allowing immigrants brought illegally to the U.S. as children gain legal resident status, and only 36% oppose. And by that same margin, Americans want equal rights for all immigrants. Most Americans think the administration has gone too far and oppose the draconian policy of mass deportation. Voters also now see that there is a value to immigration. Last year, 55% of Americans said they wanted a reduction of immigrants. Today, that has dropped to 30%. According to last month's Gallup poll, a record 79% now say that immigration is good for the country. It's a jump of 15%. Only 17% now say it's bad. The change has been primarily driven by a shift in Republicans 64% who now agree that immigrants are good for the country, up from their low of 40% a year ago. Yet the fact remains that while voters' attitudes may be changing, the current administration remains at war with our immigrant population. I believe God's Spirit is calling us to respond to this moral crisis in our country. VA nurse Alex Pretty spoke at a veteran's funeral not long ago, saying, "Today we remember that freedom is not free. We have to work at it, nurture it, protect it, and even sacrifice for it. May we never forget and always remember our brothers and sisters who served so that we may enjoy the gift of freedom." May this be our call to action. And so what can people of faith do? Here's a list of a few things that you can contemplate before I turn it over to our guests from WAISN. Participate in a peaceful protest at an ICE facility or elsewhere. Write your congressional delegation. Volunteer with the Washington Immigration Solidarity Network that monitors ICE activity and accompanies immigrants to court hearings and other activities to benefit and assist our immigrant neighbors. Volunteer with a resettlement agency or a congregation that is supporting an immigrant family in your neighborhood. Some congregations are even shopping for immigrants, as I mentioned, who are afraid to go out. Check to see if your church has a sanctuary policy, which we do now here at Our Saviors. Volunteer at a local food bank and or contribute needed goods. More and more, because of the lack of federal funding, food banks are in desperate need of your support. Provide temporary housing for a refugee who may be homeless now because the funding support for their resettlement is gone. And then I mentioned the work of Global Refuge, particularly their work with Casa Camino a Casa. And then find out if there are immigrants in your neighborhood and make sure that they know their rights if they're confronted by ICE. And these cards are available in multiple languages, many of them in your libraries. Let them know that they do have a right to not open their doors, to remain silent, to don't sign anything, report the raid, to fight back. These are their rights. Know them yourself and help your neighbors, your immigrant neighbors, know that they do have rights. I like this quote from Pope Leo that reminds us of what it means to be the church today. A church that sets no limits to love, that knows no enemies to fight, but only men and women to love, is the church that the world needs today. We can respond to something horrible by shutting down, or we can look for the light. There is always a way forward if we look for it. Rather than despair, we can hold on to hope with courage and find our purpose. This is a season of epiphany. And as people of faith, we remember about light breaking into the darkness to bring renewal and restoration, to offer healing and hope. We are people of the light bearers, the light bringers. And we must be relentless in our determination to shine in whatever ways we can through this dark time. As Amanda Gorman reminded us, there is always light if we are only brave enough to see it and only brave enough to be it. I want to close with a couple of slides, remembering that what makes America great are immigrant neighbors. Jesus wasn't neutral. He sided with the poor, the sick, and the immigrant. Be like Jesus. I want to introduce Leslie Brown. Leslie is from WAISN, and she's here to tell you a little bit about what they're up to and how you can help. This is for
Okay, why not?
There we go.
Ready? 1, 2. Can you hear me back there? Good morning. Does everyone have 10 more minutes that we can share a little bit of community chatter? I would like to start by thanking you, Rick, for inviting me to speak for a couple of minutes. And can we have a round of applause for what Rick is doing? Because this goes far and beyond this presentation, which I will not pursue, but I do want to start by sharing some good news. We can all use a little good news. Yesterday, U.S. District Judge Fred Beery in Texas, of all places, he directed government officials to release Adrian Alexander Conejo Ramos and his son, his 5-year-old son, who, by the way, had a legal and pending and ongoing asylum case before immigration court. And why were they picked up and arrested and sent to the Dealey family detention concentration camp in Texas? The reason why they were sent there is because of Stephen Miller. So it is wonderful that this judge has stood up, but I want to read to you what he said. He said, he said, where is it here? He said, immigration agents did not need to target or arrest a child. The impact on the children in our country is unfathomable. And that's a big part of why I'm here. I have 12 nieces and 9 nephews, and boy, is Christmas expensive. I just want to say, I am standing before you today because I do not want a single one of them growing up in this country and in this world under these conditions. And I need all of you to join together. And I was fortunate enough in the first Trump administration to meet the leaders and the organization called WAISN. I know it sounds funny. It stands for Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. And this network is a very small group of substantial and brilliant immigrant leaders. And those of us who are committed to this fight in our state, we look to them for leadership and guidance and direction. In 2019, I attended a rapid response team training. I put together a rapid response team here in Snohomish County, and we had some ICE activity. There wasn't very much, but a little bit, and then COVID hit. And we had to shift gears to mutual aid, because mutual aid is a movement to make sure that our community members, all of them, have the basics they need to survive and thrive. And that includes food. So if a virus is causing businesses to shut down that employ immigrants who do not have access to a social safety net, what is going to happen to those families? How are they going to eat? So we formed a a mutual aid group that was delivering food and dropping off on their porches enough for them to eat. And we got through that period. WAISN, the Immigrant Solidarity Network, was on the same wavelength, and they thought, well, they can't access a safety net, but we're not going to leave them to starve. And they went and met with Governor Inslee and negotiated support, and they set up a private network to protect the identities of the people who applied, and each immigrant who applied through that private network received a check in the mail for $1,000 twice. Because that's, you remember how long COVID was and how many people died. And our state government under Governor Inslee contributed over $33 million. And that was a substantial leadership event that kept immigrants here living and working and educating their children and receiving health care. So this is a substantial organization. They have a very small team. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is please consider going to their website and donating. Okay? That's the first thing I would like to invite you to do. And then the second thing I would like to invite you to do is go to that QR code up on the slide. If you are interested in two things, learning more and or attending a 2-hour-long virtual online training for rapid response. Now, the good news is it's 2 hours long. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. on February 6th. And there's another one in March. And the other good news for you is you don't have to join a rapid response team. Because what a rapid response team does, and I am the coordinator here in Snohomish County. We have several teams and groups of people just like you. We get in our cars and we go when we are informed of an alert of ICE activity, ICE enforcement activity. And I want to tell you what happened just now before I came in here. A woman came up to me and told me that yesterday at the Chase Bank on Colby Avenue, the security guard there, an older gentleman, one of us, I'm older than I look, was seen walking ICE agents off the property.
Oh, good.
Not saying anything, just saying get off the property, walking them off the property, and then walking them down the street and away from the Chase Bank. And they were here in Everett. Yesterday, they were at Evergreen and Casino Road, where they stopped a small car in the middle of the street, removed the driver and put that driver in their car and drove away. And there goes another family separated, another father lost, another mama with children who doesn't have any income, and now what is she going to do? And that gentleman is at the Northwest Detention Center. And Rick, I want to especially thank you for sharing the reality, the difficult reality of what's going on, because we can't look away. If any of you don't like politics, join me. And if you don't want to watch the news because it's too distressing, watch it anyway. We need you to do that, because looking the other way is part of what got us here. And some of the other things that got us here include, because I'll just tell you, I'm concerned about this 30%. I mean, the numbers are looking good, but there's still 30% of the people in this country think this is okay. And the reason why they think that is because of a 30+ year plan executed by Christian nationalists. And this is not my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. It is fact. And there's plenty of books out there you can read to learn more. This was a plan to take us back to the 30s and 40s when women stayed at home and raised children and white men were in charge. And that is, again, not my opinion. So I'm just going to say in very simple terms, two things, and then I'm going to bid you all a day of reflection and being together in community. Number one is we have to pull together. We need, when I say we, I'm talking about the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. I'm talking about the rapid response teams. I'm talking about the food banks. I'm talking about the hospitals. I'm talking about the unions. And I'm probably running late, but I want to just mention ICE agents. Why do they do this? And I just learned this like yesterday. I want to share it with you because I just met 8 ICE agents out on a detention. And one of them was a beautiful and very young, maybe 22 years old, Latino woman. And I looked at her and just said, what does your mother think of what you're doing? So the recruiting that's going on of people to work as ICE agents involves a $50,000 bonus. And if you look at all the economic challenges that the rich and powerful and corporations and corrupt politicians have set up, that has contributed to this recruitment. That is why people who are normally like you and me have sacrificed their souls and their values because they don't see any other avenue for them to make enough money to raise their families and educate their children. So let's go sacrifice our souls and values and go to work for ICE. We're going to get a $50,000 bonus. But here's the kicker. You got to sign a contract to work for 5 years. And you get $10,000 a year. And if you get arrested or if you quit, you have to pay it back with returning with tax liability and interest. So plant that hook, reel them in, and now how do you get out? How do you, because I want to walk up to them and give them a love letter and say, please quit right now. Well, then I got to pay back everything they paid me so far. And how does anybody do that? This is a plan. And we have to come together to fight it. And here's the last 2 words I'm going to say this morning. Voting matters. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Well, thanks so much, Leslie, and thank you all for being here. We have our work cut out for us in the coming weeks and months, but know that we are standing in solidarity. Our faith guides us and leads us forth, but we remain strong, courageous, and hopeful. Have a good week.